Can a religious philosopher actually bring atheists and theists together? We'll see how he fares. Yet something tells me that he's going to have the same problems as a lot of other religious thinkers that we've examined do, that he won't be able to get past the religious mind poison in his head and actually see the reality that stares him in the face. So, let's get going and find out. Today, I wanted to take another look at Josh Rasmussen, who came up in a recent video, and he's got a YouTube channel, and you know how these things go. Josh is an associate professor of philosophy at a religious university, and he's written some books on Christianity. That means he's perfect fodder for this channel, and as an academic, surely he's got to be better than the other idiots that we look at around here, right? Right? So, let's go find out.
I've noticed that atheists and theists sometimes talk past each other. Have you ever noticed that?
All the time. I've pointed it out on numerous occasions, in fact. Of course, that's not just true of atheists and theists. Lots of different groups do this, often for the very same reasons that I see in religious debates. But we'll see why Josh thinks that is, I'm sure. So far, so good, I guess. Let's keep going.
You know, the atheist has a question, the theist has a response, and they're just not seeing eye to eye. They're kind of debating and competing, maybe trying to protect their own sense of significance and rationality.
Yep, sad, isn't it? Yet you notice that he put the theists in the position of fighting to maintain their emotional comfort, right? That's not to say that atheists can't do the same thing, because I've pointed that out plenty of times in the past, totally independent of their atheism, where fifis have been a lot more important to people than the facts are, and nobody, as far as I'm concerned, gets off scot-free. Letting your feelings get in the way of the facts is wrong. Always. No exceptions at all. So that's 2 points that we've agreed on so far. I'm just wondering when it's going to all fall apart.
Here's an example of a topic that comes up, a debate. So the atheist will ask the theist, who created God? What created God? Now the theist might say something like, well, God just by definition has no creator. God is uncaused. That's just part of what I mean by God. And that's all there is to it.
Except that's meaningless. I know this isn't really part of his point. I acknowledge that. He can get to that in a second, and that's fine. I just wanted to point out where he goes so completely wrong. You don't get to define reality into existence. You don't get to just make up indemonstrable characteristics for your God. Typically, this comes up in relationship to something like the cosmological argument, where the theist simply decides with no evidence whatsoever that their God did everything. Well, how in the hell do you know that? Because the argument starts saying everything needs a cause, then they invent an ad hoc explanation for God, again, zero evidence whatsoever to support it, and my question to them is this. Says who? Well, that's got to be obvious, because that's how God is defined, according to them, but that doesn't make it true, and this is where the theist leaves the conversation. We didn't. They did. We're asking how the hell they know any of this stuff and how the hell they can demonstrate it to our satisfaction. And they don't have any coherent answers. What they're really saying is, well, it's true because I say so. And that's not impressive.
And what's going on here is the theist is defending the coherence of his or her viewpoint. Maybe he or she is feeling threatened by the atheist's question.
No, they are just demonstrating that their viewpoint has absolutely no rational coherence. What they're doing is defending their faith, not facts, faith. It has to be true because I believe it. Yet that isn't going to fly. We don't care what you believe. We care what you can demonstrate using objectively verifiable evidence. And they don't have any of that, do they? You just can't stomp your feet and hold your breath until you turn blue and expect people to take you seriously. That's not going to convince anyone, and it's childish to boot. This is the theist veering wildly off course because they know they can't get there from here in any rational, defensible way. And that's a problem, isn't it? Too bad they refuse to acknowledge that, but it is a problem nonetheless. If they're threatened, then maybe they need to reevaluate their viewpoint because it isn't rational to accept. But I don't see that happening, do you?
But the atheist is going to respond that, look, if God can be uncaused, then why can't the universe? Why is the atheist saying this? Because the atheist is defending his or her reasonableness.
No, we're just pointing out that if you can yank one ad hoc excuse out of your backside, why can't anyone else? We're pointing out that you don't just get to slap a convenient excuse on your preferred answer and deny everybody else from doing the same thing. We don't actually think that's what happened, at least for the most part, and if we did, we'd actually have to have evidence to back it up, just like you do. We're pointing out that you can't define your deity into existence and point to that made-up definition as evidence for your unsupported claims. That's not how rational discussions work. Your special pleading doesn't actually get you anywhere. We have one and only one standard. Stop pretending otherwise.
The coherency of atheism. The idea is that from the atheist perspective, it's the theist who's making this claim that each thing has a cause, and that's why the universe has to have a cause. But if the theist is granting that something like God can be uncaused, then why couldn't the atheist just say that the universe is uncaused?
But what you're missing here, Josh, is that the claim made by the theist is entirely unevidenced. They have a pre-existing, emotionally derived destination that they're desperately trying to get to, and they're just making things up out of whole cloth so that they can get there. You haven't demonstrated that there is a God in the first place. You haven't shown how you know what this supposed God is like if it was real to begin with. This is all just empty claims aimed at reaching an emotionally comforting conclusion. We're just pointing out that you don't get special dispensation to just make stuff up because it makes you happy. We're not saying that we believe that the universe is eternal. I don't know of a lot of atheists who've ever said that. We're just pointing out that if you get to invent things out of whole cloth, well, as a point of reference, we do too. It's actually a call to get you to stop and think about what you're saying before you go around flapping your lips. Maybe you people ought to give that a shot.
Now at this point, a lot of theists will say that, well, there's an important difference between God and the universe. For example, God had no beginning, but the universe had a beginning.
And how do you know that? Just because a book says a thing, that doesn't make that thing true. We are pointing out the difference between a faith-based position and an evidence-based one. Faith doesn't actually get you anywhere demonstrable. Anybody can make claims. The religious are just really, really bad at backing them up in any demonstrable way, and that's what's required whether you like it or not. Saying that God has no beginning is like saying the flying spaghetti monster has no beginning. I don't care what you say. I care what you can demonstrate. And you people, you need to get to work.
Or God is a necessary being, but the universe is not necessary, it's contingent.
Prove it! These are just assertions. If you can say that God is necessary, why can't we just say the universe is necessary? Neither are objectively defensible, and your feelings don't matter. Nothing in your emotional state of mind dictates the operation of the objective universe. Just because you really want it to be true, that doesn't make it true.
And these are relevant differences. Okay, but from the atheist perspective, this sounds like you're just coming up with something to protect your theory. It'd be sort of like if the flying spaghetti monster theorist, the person who thinks that there's this invisible flying spaghetti monster, which we have no evidence for, said that, look, everything has a cause except things made up out of spaghetti and things that fly and are invisible.
Which is why the flying spaghetti monster was made up in the first place. It exists to demonstrate just how asinine the religious mindset actually is. This is another time I have to point out that he has no understanding, none whatsoever, of what's actually going on here. He's just explained it, yet when it comes to his side, he'll be completely blind. This is where these discussions always go wrong. This isn't about what makes you happy. This is not about what makes you feel good. It's about what is the most demonstrably, defensibly, objectively, verifiably, evidentially true. Yet every time that we point out the utterly absurd nature of religious faith, the religious, they just don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about it. It's got to be true because it makes them happy. They'll just make things up to protect their childish feelings. And you don't get to do that whether you like it or not. Not if you hope to maintain any kind of remote intellectual validity. But of course, the religious don't really care about that, do they? They only care about their feels. They don't give a crap about the reals. And then they get mad at us for pointing out all the places that they're going wrong. And I'm not sure what rational excuse Josh here can come up with in that regard.
That's the one exception. It feels like you're just cheating, you're just trying to protect your theory, and there's a similar feeling that the atheist has about the theist who just announces that, oh, not everything has a cause. In fact, my God is the one kind of thing that doesn't.
Because it's completely indefensible. Faith is not a demonstrable path to truth. Just because you really want it to be true, that doesn't mean that it is true. It doesn't matter how many times we point this out to the religious, though, because they continue to cling desperately to faith because reality is just too scary a place for them to reside. This is really coming off like another example of, "Nuh-uh, you're doing it too." Yeah, we're just trying to help you see that you're wrong. And you people aren't listening because you just don't care. And I can't express just how pathetic that actually is. Knock it off.
So here we have the atheist and theist talking past each other, not really seeing eye to eye. And I think one way that can help go a long way for atheists and theists instead to learn from each other rather than competing with each other, to actually hear each other and to listen to each other, is to first of all recognize the common value, the common desire in following reason where it leads and finding truth.
Except that doesn't seem to be what the religious actually want. They don't want truth. They want comfort. Every single discussion I ever have with a theist proves that conclusively. The second that they get backed into a corner where their beliefs have been shown to be wrong, they double down on their faith and they come out swinging. Sometimes literally. That's less likely online, but in person, yeah, that's a real danger. These people can be scary. The religious are really, really good at turning to violence or running away, whichever is easier. What they're absolutely horrible at is acknowledging that they're wrong, that their beliefs are unsupported, that they don't have any evidence, that there isn't a value to blind belief and blind faith for the sake of their feelings. They're not interested in any of that. It's why you keep seeing theists saying that there's absolutely nothing that could ever change their mind about their gods. Ken Ham? Nothing could ever make him doubt God. William Lane Craig? Well, if it was ever proven conclusively that God wasn't real, he'd still believe because he has the conviction of the Holy Spirit. Yeah, what the hell is that and how do you prove it? These are not rational people because religion is not a rational position to hold. But they don't care, do they? So long as they get that dopamine shot in the head, they'll believe anything, no matter how objectively stupid it is.
And instead of competing and the atheist feeling like he or she's not being heard or understood, and the theist feeling like maybe insecure and needing to sort of beat the atheist over with arguments or whatever, weaponizing reason, instead, put down the weapons and just listen to each other.
What we can see here is that he basically understands the problem, and that's kind of the sad part. Atheists are frustrated because we aren't being heard, because the religious, they don't want to listen. The religious are insecure because their beliefs are just stupid and completely indefensible. And he gets it, yet he still believes because, fee-fees. How many times have we seen this before? The theist gets right to the edge, knowing everything that they're doing wrong, and then they refuse to take that last step into reason because their emotions get in the way. Or, as is likely in this case, an ironclad statement of faith required to keep his job gets in the way. And it's funny how science doesn't need any of that, but religion does, right? Kinda sad.
With respect to where God came from, maybe both the atheist and the theist can agree on something. In fact, they can both agree that if there is a necessarily existing God, then because of its necessary existence, perhaps it wouldn't have to be caused.
But you'd have to prove it first, otherwise we're right back at square one. I don't care about your ifs. Demonstrate that you're right, or stop believing it. Stop making a fool of yourself. If a frog had wings, it wouldn't bump its ass on the ground when it hopped. But since frogs don't have wings, that's a completely irrelevant statement. If doesn't matter. Reality does. Now, we've talked about this before, how the religious don't seem to know the difference between if and because. They might say, if God exists, but all they can hear in their head is because God exists. Because they can't deal with a world where that statement isn't true, even if it demonstrably isn't. This is why discussions fall apart. It isn't our fault, it's theirs. They don't care about logic, reason, evidence, or reality. They only care about their feelings, and that's a completely childish thing to do. Maybe, just hear me out here, but maybe it's time for them to grow up. It can only help.
Both the atheist and the theist can agree to that. And similarly, if the universe is necessarily existent, then perhaps it wouldn't have to be caused, and both the atheist and the theist can agree on that too.
Except the theist never would, because it's a cornerstone of their faith, and atheists, by and large, wouldn't either, because that violates the evidence that we actually have at hand. So you're just wrong here, Josh. What else is new? We know that our particular instantiation of the universe had a beginning. What that says about a larger cosmos or meta-universe or anything like that, if any such thing actually exists, we don't know. We just don't, and we can't pretend that we do. But this isn't really a question about the universe in which we live, because we know that had a beginning. We just don't know a lot of the other details. And whether the religious like it or not, when we don't know something, that's not a license to just make something else up. Again, I think Josh misunderstands when atheists say that, because we're not actually being serious. We're demonstrating that the religious can't get to God by simply defining things the way that they'd like them to be. I don't know why reality tends to go right over the religious's head, but sure seems to, doesn't it?
So then we can work together instead of competing and debating and continuing to see past each other and speak past each other. We can look together at, well, what is the nature of a self-existent, necessarily existent thing? Would it be more like the universe, or could it be more like God?
Who says anything like that exists, period? Because it's certainly not us. We accept things as they seem to be based on the observations that we make and the evidence that we find. By and large, our emotions aren't involved at all. On the religious side, though, that's pretty much all that's going on. It's all fee-fees and screw anything else. They can't deal with the fact that their beliefs are unsupported because they don't really care if they are. They just want to be happy. If they have to believe utter nonsense because that makes them feel good, then that's perfectly fine with them. And they're completely incapable of recognizing that fact when we point it out to them, because they just don't care one bit. They only care about their fee-fees. They don't care about anything else. But honestly, this can't be that hard. Stop believing dumb stuff. Give it a shot.
Are there reasons? Does the light of reason reveal anything about the nature of necessary things? Well, we can get on to that question once we get past just talking past each other.
Except that just won't happen because, at least in this instance, the religious are allergic to reality. They don't want to understand because understanding potentially leads to unhappiness, and unhappiness can't happen. So they just spout their emotionally comforting screed, we point out just how dumb it all is and how indefensible it is, and they just keep believing anyhow. Because they just don't care. If they cared, then when we asked them what it would take to get them to reject their religious beliefs, they wouldn't be saying nothing. They'd be saying the same thing that we are. It would and should take evidence. In fact, no one should ever believe anything without evidence to begin with. Your feelings shouldn't remotely enter into it. Only your intellect should, and in the case of religion, that is virtually never engaged, period. This is not at all impressive, even though he got really close a couple of times, but the religious baggage in the end, perhaps the unbreakable statement of faith that keeps him in his job, kept him from actually getting to the finish line. That said, though, it was certainly a better entry than some, and therefore I have a few more Josh Rasmussen videos that I want to do in the future, including a 4-part series that will be coming up soon. We'll get to see if he's going to get any better, but I wouldn't be holding my breath. But of course, I'm willing to be proven wrong, so we'll see.